There are times when, as an artist, you need to be able to utilize a grid to draw an image to make sure that your dimensions and your measurements are all accurate before you apply whatever medium that you're going to use to finish the drawing that you're doing of the original image. And I have found that as much practice as we do with making grids and then practicing using grids, application of kind of misses with some students. So today we're going to look at how to put a grid that you have made onto an original image, and then how to make a grid to redraw that image and get the image onto your final paper without using without showing the grid lines. So to begin with, I have this lovely self-portrait by Rembrandt, and I just chose this as an example because it was something that I had readily available. So I've printed out my image on an 8.5 by 11 inch sized sheet of paper, and I'm going to go ahead and put a grid over top of it. So there's a whole nother video under my Art 1 category about how to make grids. But just a really quick refresher, I'm lining my ruler up on the 0, putting an indication at every whole inch to mark where my inches are, going across the top of my image, and then I will slide my ruler down. Don't twist anything, just slide it down, line it up on the 0 again, mark every whole inch. You could potentially use a different sized grid. It doesn't have to be inches, but for the sake of this assignment and the demonstration, we're just going to stick with some inches. Turn your paper and use your ruler to connect the lines that will form the vertical lines of your grid, and continue connecting those all the way across. And for the sake of speed, we're going to start putting in our horizontal lines. So line it up on the 0 on the outside edge. Put all your measurement marks every 1 inch. Keep going all the way down. Do the exact same thing on the opposite side. Remember not to twist your ruler around. Just slide. And then connect your dots to get the horizontal lines that go over your image that give you those even 1 inch squared sections. So we would keep going, and for the sake of saving time, I've already printed out a picture that has a 1 inch grid placed over top of it. There are a handful of websites that you can use to help you do this without having to draw the lines, and I recommend that you do that for the sake of speed. So the one that I used for this one is a specific artist's name, timgagnon.com/grid/. There is a link to that website on my webpage, so feel free to use that. You find your image, you upload it to this site, you choose the size of the grid that you'd like to use and how you want the grid to look, and then you print it out and it's done. So we have a grid over top of our image now. And this is where I just find it really confusing when students look at me like they have no idea what to do next. Obviously, we need another sheet of paper to draw the image from. Yes, theoretically, you could just trace it onto your final paper, but then it wouldn't be your drawing, and that kind of defeats the purpose. So now we're going to put a grid onto a blank sheet of paper. So again, we're lining the grid or the ruler up with the 0, marking every inch. We want the grids to match in size. Keep going across. If you were enlarging or shrinking the size of the original image, then obviously your grids might not match exactly. You would want a larger grid on this blank paper for enlarging the original image, or a smaller one on this blank paper for reducing it. And again, connect your dots to make your horizontal and your vertical lines. So you would just keep going across through the wonderful power of television. Ta-da! We have one that's finished. So now I go through, and we've talked about this. I find it helpful to letter and number A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, whatever. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You would keep the alphabet going, keep the numerical side going over here, and then do the same on your blank paper. Honestly, with this one, like I said, to make things fast, I use the exact same website, timgagnon.com/grid/ and just uploaded a blank sheet of paper and printed the grid on it. That way I know they match. So whatever you see in box 1D, we're going to draw. I won't go into details about how to draw using a grid because we should have already practiced that, and hopefully that part is not what's getting you confused. Go down to the next column and row across. Depending on the medium that you're going to use, really determines what your grid should look like as you're drawing it. Mostly in Art Ones, we use this as a preparatory for charcoal, which means we need to look at things like shadows and highlights. So I might draw out this entire shape onto this paper, so I'm not just looking at the actual objects, the eye itself, the nose. Sometimes I'm looking at where my lights and my shadows are so that I know that I have those in the right place and they serve as a guide when I go to apply the charcoal. So again, you would just be taking what you've done here and moving it one box at a time onto the gridded image. So again, for the sake of time, I have already completed this drawing. So we have the original Rembrandt image that I'm looking at as a reference, and we have my version of the Rembrandt that I've used the grid to draw, and I've looked at things like shadows and highlights and shapes and placement of objects so that I know that they are right. But we don't want this grid line that we see going over top or in the background to be part of our finished product. So now what we're going to do is take our paper, final drawing paper or whatever medium that you're using, place it over top, and very, very, very lightly, like I don't even know that, oh, you can see through it, cool. Very, very, very lightly trace using pencil, probably as lightly as you possibly can, your drawing onto your final. This way you have a slight outline to keep you, it's like a guide to keep you on track with where your darks and your lights will go, or whatever other medium or techniques that you need to use. You have that as a base. The pencil lines shouldn't show up, and you don't have grid lines in the background that are distracting. If you were to just erase those out, a lot of times your eraser lifts off the tooth of the paper, and sometimes different mediums will stick more, I guess, seriously to that section. So even if you erase it, you often end up with darker areas where your grid lines originally were because of the fact that they were there and the paper was destroyed where it was erased. So be really gentle with that, and honestly, this is the best way that I know to do it. So finished product, you just have this final image lightly drawn so that it's just a guide. We don't want solid, hard, black cartoon outlines. And we would go through and add our charcoal or whatever medium on top of this. If you feel like your pencil marks are too dark that you won't be able to do any shading without them being visible, lightly go over top of them to erase the darkness. And that is the process of making or using an image and a grid to redraw. So again, we started with the original image. We put a grid over top of it. We moved on to a blank sheet of paper, put a grid over top of that, used the grid to redraw from the original to the blank sheet of paper with the grid, finished the drawing, and then traced the drawing onto our final paper sans grid lines. Hope that helps. Thanks so much.